like button. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the opportunity to tap in the future. But the only questions we'll be taking is on YouTube. Ryan, how are we doing today?
Doing fantastic, my friend. We are just less than a month now from the big day. So, just kind of easing along, man. Finish up scouting reports, doing work, and feel like it's a little bit of some sleepless nights that are going to come up as we continue to finish the 2025 NFL draft cycle. So I'm good.
Don't make it like you're not excited. Don't act like you're not excited for what's going to be an amazing month coming up. But of course, we want to engage and continue to engage further with everybody that is subscribed on the A to Z Film Room YouTube channel. We had a lot of awesome questions that came in this week, Ryan, that we're going to get to. Again, just a reminder, if you're on YouTube, drop a comment. We will get to those questions throughout the stream. I'm going to throw us right into this first question, Ryan, that we got from Jared Cower. It seems that because of injuries, talented players like Ben Morrison and did we determine it was Shavon?
I think it's Shavon Revel. I believe it's
okay.
Revel.
Shavon Revel has fallen out of the first round conversation entirely of the past couple of months. Are these guys going to be major value plays at this point?
I mean, yes, they're value plays for sure. I would argue that Revel is more of a value play than Morrison, though. I like Jared for me. Joe, I don't know if you agreed with this. I feel like we had a little bit of discourse in summer scouting over Benjamin Morrison, but like I was always more like day 2 Benjamin Morrison than like late first round Benjamin Morrison. Like I was always more on like that wavelength just overall. So will he be a value in the sense of, is there a chance that Benjamin Morrison is still around late second round to early third round potentially due to the shoulder/hip injury that he's had over the last 12 months? It's very possible. So yes, he could be a value in that sense. I think Revel, though, Joe, could be a huge value because I do think that there was a world if he was fully healthy, he was able to test, had a complete 2024 season, that he could have been a 15 pick potentially in this class. Like I think he had that type of upside. Now we're talking about a kid that's probably going to go more in the late first round to early second round bucket. So yes, I think both players are values. I would argue though that Revel, in my opinion, is more of a value, and he could end up being one of the better corners in this class long term if he's able to obviously get back to full health and full strength after the leg injury that he suffered during the 2024 season.
The timing too in which he suffered the injury, I think I'm a little bit less worried about what his availability is going to be like. It was very early on. It was like 3 or 4 games into the season, if I remember correctly. And I know that just naturally our perception is, okay, ACL, this is going to impact his ability to explode. It's 2025. The recovery timetable for ACL injuries is a lot sooner. If he does have a little bit of a sluggish start to his rookie season, and when we start to see that explosion for him is in his second year in the NFL, that wouldn't surprise me. This also was a guy coming from a smaller program with not a lot of tape against premier receivers. So that was also partially naturally on the table. The last part with this, Morrison, I don't think is as high of value. I actually still think if we remove the tape on Morrison, he had some of the best corner tape in this class without a doubt. But his injury history were particular injuries to body parts that are correlated arguably to his lack of weight. That was one of his things on film that stood out to us when we broke him down and we talked about it in the preseason was he's lighter, he's not as strong, he's not as good as a tackler. He needs to put on a little bit more bulk to his frame. And that kind of resulted in him getting banged up, shoulder, hip injury, those types of things. That's stuff that is quite possibly caused by that lack of, him not being as heavy as some of these other corner prospects.
Well, what's weird too is that obviously I had the play strength major concerns that I brought up in the preseason with Morrison. Shoulder injury is not good to be able to answer those play strength concerns that I had. But Joe, a bigger concern overall is a corner with a bad hip is scary, man. Like that's really, really scary to me. Like it really is because we all talk so much about hip fluidity and transitions and ability to turn and run, open up, like all those different things. When we're talking about a guy with a bad hip, and I am not a doctor, obviously. So maybe he's back to full strength. Yes, obviously, Dr. Roberts on this podcast. Maybe, though, he gets back to full strength and this is a moot point. But we just don't typically see corners with hip issues. Like that's a very kind of unique case, right? And like that's a little bit scary overall for a Benjamin Morrison. So slight value based upon where he is. If he comes back to full strength, I don't think that we can assume that he's going to be at full strength though. Like that's the only thing though. Like if we're
Right.
if we're tempering our expectations, I think we have to say that is overly concerning. Here's the other big concern about the Revel injury, which is why I think that he's fallen down, Joe. It's not just the fact that he's 24 and he wasn't able to test, because I think he would have tested great. You said one thing that I think is the major concern with him still. He has never really been tested against NFL wide receivers. He never
Right.
really has. That's why the Senior Bowl was going to be so big for him, right? To be able to go against some of the best wide receivers.
I bet he would have done really well. I think that he would have had a week reminiscent of Quinion Mitchell last year if he was able to participate in all that, because he has all the natural athletic tools in a setting like that to win and put together a couple of highlights that everybody's oohing and eyeing over.
Right. Well, and I think I told you this one, but I wanted to share this with the people out there because this was a fascinating conversation. At the Combine, when Revel was talking about someone asked him who are the best receivers that he went against in his career. And his answer was 2023 against Marshall. He went against number 2 is what he said. And that rang in my head, Joe. You know why? Because number 2 for Marshall was Jaden Harrison, who played at Notre Dame this past year, who was Notre Dame's main kick returner, okay? And Jaden Harrison was a good role player for Notre Dame. But you know what he also was for Notre Dame, Joe? He was Notre Dame's 7th leading receiver on a team that was not very good at throwing the football, right? So the best receiver that you went against in your 2 years, or in your, 3 years at ECU, but 2 years as a starter, was
Right.
Notre Dame's 7th leading receiver this past year. So if we're talking about and this is a real thing, right? There is a area of concern with Revel of the competition that he played against. And he wasn't able to answer that ultimately, right? And I personally think that it's going to translate because he's 6'1.5". He probably would have ran 4.35, and he has 32 plus inch arms. He's athletic as heck. I think it's going to translate if he's healthy. But we have never seen him against guys that can really test him vertically, guys that can really run past him, guys that can really separate at a high level. That is a guessing game that unfortunately we're not able to see because he was not able to go down to Mobile and showcase himself or even test it. Or he actually went to East West, but he only did the interview process. He wasn't able to go down to Frisco and do it either. So either way, he wasn't able to showcase his talents against some high-end NFL prospects at wide receiver either.
Great first question. Again, anybody who's hopping in on YouTube, feel free to drop a comment. Let us know what you're thinking. What do you want us to answer? We've got plenty of questions that we're going to get to from Twitter. Nice grouping of questions that folks send in to us like we always get, but we'd love for more interaction from the folks tuning in on YouTube. So comment, and also if you haven't already, hit the like button if you're tuning in. Next question.
If you are over on Twitter, come over to YouTube. Come over to YouTube. I've tweeted it out. Go to the A to Z Sports Film Room channel on YouTube. It's a lot easier to have good conversations in this chat if you are in here on YouTube. A lot easier.
All right, next question that we have from Tom Kelly. With the COVID eligibility extensions coming to an end, does day 3 have more depth than usual? Ooh, this is an interesting question. What do you think?
So that first year after COVID, Joe, do you remember it was interesting because up until that point, an average NFL draft class was about like 750 prospects or something like that. That first year after COVID, or maybe it was the year after, I can't remember, but like right after COVID began and was a thing, we had a class that had 2,100 players in it, right? Comparative to 7 something that we typically have. So there was a boom very quickly after COVID of guys entering the draft. There was a lot. I think it was the year after the COVID year. So the year after 2020. So I think it was the 2021 NFL draft probably. This class is similar. It's going to be a bigger class. I think the fact that people have looked at it and said, there's not a lot of true first-round grades in this class, people have deemed it as a bad class. And my conversation was the same that question just asked, was that this is not a bad class. It's not a top-heavy class, but there is depth, man. Like, there's good day 2 depth. There's a lot of day 3 depth. There's going to be some kids that go priority free agent that in a typical year, as far as like pure volume perspective, would have been drafted in their respective NFL drafts. So yes, the whole conversation around for me is that now we're at the tail end. some of those players who held on to the eligibility as long as possible, there is a higher volume of players. So I think day 2 has depth. I think day 3 has depth. The reason that people think it's a bad class is that the top level talent this year, there's just not as many of them as we potentially would like in a class.
Well, I think also we need to talk about like the other aspect of this. Right when COVID happened and these guys were given extra eligibility, there was something else significant that happened, which was the implementation of NIL and the incentivization for prospects to return to school because they're being paid salaries to stick around. Even if guys were not.
And that's not
starters,
ending, by the way. That's not ending. That will continue. Yes.
That's not ending. When you have these guys that like even weren't premier starters, but their value as depth pieces, sticking around was important. If there were guys that had day 3 grades, but say theoretically, financially, we would always hear this at the combine. There would always be one kid who would declare, and during the combine, the broadcast team would be like, yeah, I didn't think this guy was going to jump in the class, but it seems like he had some sort of family issue or there was some sort of financial reasoning that he decided to enter the class because he needed to help out his family. There's always guys like that. I feel like we have completely seen not only less of that, I feel like we haven't really seen any of that. There are far less of those storylines because if you're a good player on your roster and you're on an SEC team or you're on a Big Ten team, or even if you're on a G5 team, you can transfer, but you're making $250K. I was talking with somebody yesterday that told me a 5th-year guy was making $500,000 and received offers to make 1.2 at big programs. And this is like a mid to late day 3 pick that maybe he goes back and improves his draft stock a little bit. But realistically, if he'd have declared, he would have been a day 3 guy as a senior. So you're getting that much money and that much money's on the table. That is why that these classes are shaping out the way that they are. I think going forward, classes are going to be incredibly deep. The real question that we're now going to have is how is NIL going to affect the top of the draft classes? That I don't think we're going to have an answer to because the depth is going to come from more mature players and more guys sticking around.
I need to find the story, but did you see this story about this safety? He's like a mid-level safety in college football, but apparently he's suing the NCAA because he thinks that he should have one more year of eligibility. I don't know if it was a medical issue or whatever.
Was he the D2 kid?
No. He was a kid that was definitely at least the University of Ohio at one point, but I think he's been at like several different schools at this point. But he literally is going to sue the NCAA or is in the process of suing the NCAA because he wanted an extra year because he's claiming that they're going to cost him $500,000 that he would have been paid in salary for an additional season. You know what I mean? So, dude, the NIL space now that agents are involved, right? And to the level that they are, the NIL agents, it's only going to get crazier. It is because we like this first early part is just the Wild West. Like people still don't understand 100% of how NIL works and how they can manipulate NIL. And the fact that when agents can now figure out more and more of how they can manipulate NIL and players understand how they can manipulate the NIL money, then it's going to get even worse. And markets are going to continue to be created and recreated. It's going to be fascinating to watch. So yes, NIL has definitely been because I mean, here's the point, right? Is that like, why would I go and be a late day 3 draft pick or even a priority free agent if I can go back to school and make $500,000 next year because I'm a good college football player, right? Like that's the point, because you might not be able to make a living playing professional football, more than likely, at least on the NFL side of things. So yes, NIL is reshaping things. It is pretty fascinating. We're going to be talking about this like 20 years from now when people ask about like the birth of NIL, and we're going to be talking about NIL and the COVID eligibility rule, like kind of rolled into
No one's going to know what we're
created
saying.
Absolute chaos. Like I know, but we're going to be like the old men talking about it, right? And I'm going to be talking to like my daughters, Juliet, Rain, and like telling them about like a time that I had to deal with COVID and NIL stuff in the scouting space at a very high level. So it's very fascinating. Can I share one more story that I did on a podcast the other day? This is interesting. So I was talking to someone, Joe, that's in the league currently in his scouting position, okay? Literally in the league now. And they have said that a lot of NFL teams are so thankful for the NIL space. Do you know why?
Because guys are actually learning and improving and developing?
No, not actually. It gives them data on how players handle making money and playing
Uh,
football.
that's a
So,
really good point. That's a really good point.
so now they know, wow, that guy got a little bit of money and he checked out. Wow, a guy got a little bit of money and he stopped working hard. So what's it going to be like when he's making even more money, right? Like you get now
Mm.
a deeper understanding of how a player reacts to making a lot of money. And when they react, it shows a lot. We know this money shows true colors in a lot of ways. Some people can make an endless amount of money and they work hard endlessly because that's just their work habits and they love what they do. But then there's some kids, and there's a couple in this 2025 class that I'm not going to name out loud right now, that I'm telling you right now, Joe, they got a little bit of money and they stopped working hard. Guarantee it that happens, right? So the NFL teams are utilizing this NIL understanding too, right? Like a player got a little bit of money and they started slacking and not working hard. That gives them a little bit of insight into whether they should invest in that player or not, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Right. It's pretty visible, and it's not like a guarantee when we say this, but like it's pretty visible when a prospect comes in highly touted or transfers and was highly touted. It happens a lot less with transfers because these guys typically are, if they're coming from a smaller program, they're really motivated. It's also part of the reason why a lot of times these first round prospects do end up being transfers because they really love the game and they want to improve. But there's a reason why there's some of these 5 stars that we've brought up, these high 4 stars that we've talked about through this class, that if you pay attention and you kind of listen to the quiet part of our evaluations, it's we were hoping this guy would take a step forward, but he didn't. He stayed the
Right.
same. That means what were they doing during the offseason? What were they doing when they had nobody paying attention to them and no coaches near them? What were they doing during the summer? The summer is when you make the biggest leap. It's when you go and work with trainers. It's when you go and work out gyms outside of campus, or you're on campus and you're trying to develop chemistry and camaraderie with your teammates. So I think that is a very, very interesting point that you brought up. We have a comment. We have a couple comments, and we got one comment that's actually related to this from Sam Teets, who's been a friend of the old Believe in NFL Draft Prospects show and the first team. It feels like day 3 prospects are going to take the women's college basketball route now, where they're returning to school because their public profile and benefits are better at that level. It's very true. It's very, very true. You're better off being a star in your small market than going to a team and being on the back end of a roster.
Absolutely. And even if you're not a back end of the roster guy, like let's face it, there's a separation between good college football players and not professional athletes, right? Where if you're a really good college football player, I'm trying to find like a good example. Like, you know who popped in my head immediately, Joe, was like, actually, no, that's not a great example. Do you remember Todd Reesing that played at Kansas? Do you remember Todd Reesing? Quarterback? You don't remember him? Okay,
No.
Let me give you a different example then. The quarterback that just transferred to Michigan, right? The Mikey Keene kid that was at
Mikey
UCF
Keene, yep.
to Fresno State to Michigan. Hate to break it to people out there. Mikey Keene is not going to be on an NFL roster in a year or so, right? Like he's not going to be. But how much money do you think he just got to go to Michigan to be the starting quarterback for half a season, or to just
at least
be
$500,000 probably?
Right. Why would that kid go to the NFL a year early and not exhaust that last year of eligibility? He is clearly not an NFL quarterback, but you know what he is? He's a pretty good college quarterback, right? And there's always going to be a market for pretty good college quarterbacks. So a kid that has the opportunity to take that last year of eligibility or go and try to chase the NFL dream, if you're clearly not an NFL player, it pays to be able to go back for one more year. And then you know what? After that, you can still chase your dream. Like you can still go chase it if you choose that you want to chase it ultimately. So yes, being a good football player is better than being a borderline or not rosterable at all NFL player, because good football players nowadays are making a whole lot of money, especially in those bigger markets.
Sam Teets also brought up, he says that Chase Bryce at Clemson App State could have been a good example. Like I think he came back, and I don't think he even played. So like that's a good example of a guy returning and just getting a little bit of money. We're seeing more and more of that, of these guys coming in with backup contracts, basically. We have a question in the chat. Again, anybody who's tuning in on YouTube, we are prioritizing getting to any YouTube questions over the questions that we had on Twitter. Connor Laws asks, if you were the Titans, do you draft Ward, Carter, or trade back? I think that this late into the process, hearing how much the Titans love Cam Ward, you draft Cam Ward. I think even before the combine, I think that their decision to take Ward should have been decided a while ago. Will Levis showed that he is not a natural playmaker at quarterback. He's shown that he is not a natural player. Move him to fullback or something.
Do you know who the other quarterback is on the roster for the Titans, by the way, outside of Levis? Do you know this?
Who is it?
Brandon Allen. It's the only other quarterback on the roster.
Oh, I forgot they signed Brandon. Brandon Allen's probably going to make the roster over Will Levis. I'm telling people that right now. There's probably a really good shot that Brandon Allen makes the roster.
After being on A to Z Sports Nashville the last few weeks, Joe, I would be very surprised if Will Levis was on the Tennessee Titans in 2025. I think they're going to exhaust every opportunity to potentially get him off the roster. Yep. And yes, I think they'll have a rookie quarterback and they'll have Brandon Allen as his main backup in 2025.
To finish my point on Ward, though,
yep,
you don't get many opportunities to pick first overall. You just don't. That was why, as a Giants fan, I was more than happy to entertain at the very beginning of this cycle. Like, oh, hey, yeah, we'll trade up. We'll gladly trade up. I didn't think it was going to actually come to fruition. This was going to happen eventually. Teams, I think, are smart enough to realize, hey, this is a bad quarterback situation. We have uncertainty for next year. We don't know where we're going to be picking. Let's get our guy now. Let's buy ourselves a little bit of a cushion to build this roster and start to turn things in the direction with Cam Ward leading the way. So yeah, Cam Ward's the pick. I think that it's gotten to the point where it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, no, I think Cam Ward's going to be the pick. I've been on that wavelength for a month and a half, Joe. I think Cam Ward was always going to be the pick. The only question is, was it going to be Tennessee picking at one? Was it going to be the Giants trading up? Was it going to be Cleveland trading up? Were the Raiders going to? And obviously we've gotten a little bit of deeper insight into these conversations because free agency has now happened, right? And so we know what teams have settled at quarterback, or at least are okay for the short term versus the long term at the quarterback position. What an interesting world we're in right now, though, where the New York Giants are now going to trot out one of Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, or Tommy DeVito. It is a fantastic time to be a New York Giants fan, man. Absolutely fantastic. But did they have any other choice though, Joe? The coach and the general manager on the last leg, man.
I know. Someone tweeted that line from Moneyball where Brad Pitt was like, we're never going to replace, I forget which player he was referring to. And he said, but we can do it through the aggregate, which applies maybe in baseball, but they literally brought in Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson. They brought in two guys to form some sort of aggregate quarterback. It's an unbelievable joke. You had a guy that was a dumbfounding, idiotic decision maker in Daniel Jones, and you brought in two guys who are also not the best decision makers. You have Jameis Winston, who is extremely turnover prone and idiotic, and then you have Russell Wilson, who is the polar opposite of the angle, where he makes mistakes out of timidness. So we have just gone to both ends of the spectrum. And whoever's the least stupid is going to start. Whoever's the least bad is going to be the starting quarterback. I hope that the Browns don't want Shedeur Sanders, and I don't think that that's going to happen, though.
It's just funny. It's funny how the world works. I expected Russell Wilson to be a New York Giant probably a month ago, and it has come to fruition. I just can't believe that you put together a quarterback room of Jameis Winston and Tommy DeVito behind.
I hate you. I hate you.
You know why? Because they've overpopulated it now, Joe. They're not taking a rookie quarterback. I don't even know if they're taking a mid-round quarterback. Maybe they take a mid-round guy to compete with Tommy DeVito, maybe. But I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, and I honestly don't care if they do. If Jalen Milroe's on the board in the third round, I'm more than happy with entertaining that, but I don't think he's going to be there. Brandon Hallman commented, Giants trying to secure that number one pick next year. But here's the thing, Brandon. I would love for that to happen. You know when else this almost happened? This year. And you know what happened? They played the Colts and they beat them in a meaningless, unimportant game. You think Joe Shane's not going to go out there and try and win a bunch of meaningless games because he's trying to save his job and still get fired regardless? They're going to win 6 games. They're going to be picking 5th overall, and they're still not going to get a quarterback because the quarterback class next year is probably just as weak.
If they were really trying to get the number one pick next year, they would have signed Jameis and they would have brought back Tommy DeVito and they would have drafted a 4th round quarterback. That would have been the signs that they are tanking, but they can't tank. If they tank, Brian Daboll's out of a job. Joe Shane is out of a job. Neither one of those guys right now are making decisions to want that first overall pick next year because you know why, Joe?
Well, that's
they
the
won't
problem.
be making the first overall pick, so they're not doing that. That is not the vantage point. They brought in Russell Wilson and even Jameis Winston because they think that raises their floor as a team, and it does, honestly. Like, Russell Wilson would be better than what they had at quarterback last season, obviously. He's still a good quarterback. He's not great anymore, obviously. He's not very good anymore. He's just good. So, you know what's going to happen? The New York Giants are going to go 6-11. Their head coach and general manager are still going to get fired, and they're going to have the 7th pick in the draft, and they're not going to be able to get a quarterback.
Yeah, man.
So that's what's going to happen.
We all know that's what's going to happen. I've come to terms with what our reality is. To get back to questions that we have, Bazooka Fanatic comments, does Torrey Horton have NFL wide receiver 3 upside? His game and numbers in 2023 and 22 were too good to ignore. I've liked Torrey Horton, and I'm glad that Torrey Horton, the projection for him has been pretty realistic. I kind of wish Torrey Horton had transferred. I know that people don't love when we do that, but when a guy has a really nice long career at a G5 program, take advantage of the opportunity to go play for a P4 team and show off the skill set, what you're able to do. Matthew Golden is a great example of that. He had a really nice 3-year career at Houston, and he had some nice production as a kick returner, but he hit his ceiling. Understandably, there was a coaching change, but he left. He goes to Texas. And he finishes so strong that right now he's in the conversation for maybe being the first receiver selected and could end up being possibly a first rounder with limited receiving options. For Torrey Horton here, I like him as a route runner. I think that he's shown the ability to contribute on a team as a 4th wide receiver in the NFL. Do you think that's a pretty realistic projection for him?
I think 4th is good. He ran faster than I thought he was going to run. I didn't see great, vertical athlete on film. I see he's got kind of that lanky, sleek frame that's a little bit wiry, so he's got a little bit more play streak than you would consider, but he's a consistent catcher of the football. He's got some route running chops, and he's a productive player. I know he was banged up this year and only played in 6 games. That obviously limited him a little bit, but yeah, I think he could be a wide receiver 4 on the next level. If he's a low-end wide receiver 3, would I be shocked? I wouldn't be shocked necessarily, but on a healthy wide receiver room, I think he's more like a really good wide receiver 4 on the NFL level, and he's going to contribute on special teams because he does have, at least testing wise, solid linear speed that should be good on special teams from a coverage unit perspective. So I think that he has that type of upside, Joe. Quick trivia question. Do you know where Torrey Horton was before Colorado State's?
He didn't start at Colorado State. Where was he originally?
Nope. Same conference, man. He was University of Nevada. He actually played with Carson Strong in those boys.
Oh, that's right. I remember you told me this.
Yeah, that wide receiver room was decent, man. They had Romeo Doubs. They had Torrey Horton. That was a pretty good wide receiver room they had in Nevada.
Just a thought though here on Horton. I kind of think that we could see if there's a guy that has the Jalen Coker type of a path, that maybe his film isn't super sexy and he's playing against, he's got really good film, but he doesn't have a lot of matchups and big time production against a long schedule, long list of P4 teams. So that's where we have a little bit of pause with projecting a guy like this, because everything he does is good enough for him to succeed at that level. But then there's the wonder of okay, when he's matched up with defensive backs that are actually going to play in the league that are premier athletes, what does the separation look like? But Coker at Holy Cross, who I recommended back when you and I were doing consulting for RPM, and I recommended him very early on and said this guy was going to stick on a roster. I think that Torrey Horton has that same capability because he's just really technically refined and he does a lot of the things right, that at the very least he's going to be an awesome special teamer that gets some chances to play. Maybe somebody gets banged up, he starts to get some targets and some contributions.
Yeah, Torrey Horton, he's a very interesting player. The Coker one's interesting. Obviously, Torrey Horton's a little bit of a different body type than Coker was, and Coker had a 40-inch vert, right? He had some very big, interesting testing. Horton ran faster though, so maybe I'm underselling the long speed. Maybe he has that in his arsenal. At least he could develop it and potentially contribute. But he's also a little bit of an older dude, right? So we're probably closer to our ceiling with a Torrey Horton than we are comparative to a Luther Burden, for example, right? So I
Right.
think though that like we don't like talking about wide receiver fours as a collective because like it's boring, but like those are valuable, right? Like at the end of the day, you found if you are Carolina, you need to still upgrade that wide receiver room. But it's nice that you found a Jalen Coker as a value that maybe could be a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 for your team and be a legitimate producer. So those things are valuable, especially for young quarterbacks or just stable quarterbacks in his solid system.
All right, guys, reminder, if you are on YouTube and you are watching in, we've had some great questions so far. We will continue to get to our Twitter questions, but please drop a comment below. And if you haven't done so already, hit that like button. Let's get to our next
And
question.
you're over 700 people in the chat right now. Make sure to go over to YouTube so we can have great conversations in this chat. Please do it. Do it right now.
All right. Next question we have Tom Kelly, tinfoil hat question. Have you heard any whispers of a high profile draft pundit receiving? I didn't read this when I put this on here.
Yes.
Probably should have, of a high profile draft pundit receiving compensation from an agent by artificially bumping up a draft stock's prospect stock.
It happens.
I haven't heard about this.
It happens.
Oh, you think it does?
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm not like not all of them obviously, and like I think there's some guy like the high profile guys like Dane Brugler doesn't do that, right? Like there's the legitimately good sources do not do that type of stuff. But are you asking me if there's any mainstream NFL draft analyst that has ever done that? I guarantee there has, or even mid-level analysts, like low-end analysts. There have been analysts 100% that have been incentivized to publicly put out higher grades or to talk up a player 1,000,000%. Because how this thing works is, for Tom's question, is, and Joe, we know this, and we can even take this a wider scale. There are agents that incentivize, there are schools that incentivize. Like incentivizing happens all over the place in order to get names out there and to get that public facing. At the end of the day, though, I think it's a very ill use of incentivizing people, though, because ultimately, I think I have a respected name in the business. I think I know what I'm talking about, obviously, Joe. But if a prospect
That's
paid me
debatable.
to pump up his whatever, shut up. If a prospect paid me or an agent paid me to pump up their client, right, and be like, oh my gosh, player X is a 2nd-round player, even though I have like a 6th-round grade on him, that doesn't help you in the end. It doesn't help you because
NFL teams don't
care.
take. Yeah, they don't take your information as seriously as the general public does. All that changes is that when the pick happens, if you drive the narrative enough, is when the pick happens, the fan base likes the pick or not. That's it. That's literally all the outcome is.
And the good draft analysts, whether you are high-end mainstream, you're mid-level, or you're low-level, whatever, they don't get incentivized. And when I'm saying incentivized, I'm not even talking about money, right? Like I'm talking about a player going in your inbox and being like, hey man, can you pump up this? Can you showcase this? Can you put out a post for me? Like all this type of stuff. And you do it irresponsibly, even though you don't love the film, right? You're just doing it for engagements. That is so ill-advised for a analyst because ultimately the good analysts who continue to grow in the industry for the most part do it by being honest and doing thorough work, right? Me pumping up a kid saying he's a 2nd-round player, even though he's not really a priority free agent, that doesn't help me. That doesn't help me. That doesn't help the prospect. It doesn't help the agents because yes, I have scouting friends who do respect my opinion and will talk ball with me about my opinion, but they're not going to change their grade just because they want my opinion. Like that's just not how that works ultimately, right? Like my opinion does not run a draft board for an NFL team. It's just not how this process works. So that stuff I'm sure happens. I'm sure it has happened. I'm sure it will continue to happen. But I think it really does not do anybody good to do that type of work. It's just very ill-advised on every side of the coin.
2 things before we move on. One, I do know for a fact from agents that I've spoke to, they throw money at everything. There are some agents, not the lazy ones, throw money at everything. The ones that have the capital to do so throw money at everything. So I haven't heard of a story of this happening, but that is one reason why I would believe it has. And 2, I haven't had it happen to this degree, but like I've had undrafted kids DM me and ask, how much do you charge for promoted posts? And I usually don't respond to those for the kind of the reasons that you just talked about there. It's just like I both sides lose credibility. I'm not going to do that. If I don't even, if people ask me to post about them, I just don't do it. I personally would rather make my own evaluations and make my own posts. I do think though I wouldn't be surprised if somebody has done this before.
Well, there's
Yep.
players, and not to get into the weeds because we can move on after the show. But like,
Yeah.
I get DMs from prospects every single year. That's like, can you put out a posts? Can you write a reports? Can you do this? Can you pump me up and stuff like that? And one, I either don't respond, or actually most of the time I do respond. You know what I tell them, Joe? I give them honest feedback, right? Like I give them honest feedback, and I tell them, and I've told a lot of prospects this: the NFL doesn't care about my report. They just don't care. They don't care. So people respect my opinion, but they don't care about my report ultimately, right? So me telling a linebacker from Siena Heights that he's a 3rd-round pick, which someone did a few years ago, and that kid didn't even get a camp invite. That is irresponsible. Don't do that. That is like, if people that always want advice in this industry, right? They always want that type of advice. Don't do that. That didn't help him.
Right.
Didn't help you.
No.
Didn't help anybody. It just killed your credibility. Don't do that. Don't tell the Siena Heights linebacker that he's a 3rd-round player, and then he ends up not even getting a camp invite. Don't do that.
All right, let's get to our next question.
Sorry.
Back to ball. No. I mean, I always kind of get entertained when we get questions from folks that are like back end of what the industry's like. It's always me having, basically this is my 2nd year of like actually really being embedded in all this, not knowing all these different layers. It's really interesting. So of course, love to give that transparency to our listeners. Tom Kelly, another question from him. Last month before the draft, which prospects will rise the most to the 1st round? My pick is the tackle from William & Mary, Charles Grant. Look, I am a big Charles Grant fan. I love Charles Grant. I found him before anybody else did. I don't care if anyone wants to claim like, oh, you're just saying that.
Technically, I found him first because I sent it to you. But okay, sure.
You sent me a long list of random FCS prospects, some of which were guys. There were some guys that I had to turn off after 2 plays, through like 5 plays that like weren't even going to touch an NFL roster. Charles Grant was one guy who was a 265-pound, 270-pound offensive tackle at William & Mary, who as a sophomore, I said could play, I projected and believed if he added weight, he could play in the NFL. And he's been a riser through this process. He was a guy who I wish he had transferred up to like Virginia or somewhere, and he got to put on some real bulk. I disagree with the notion.
Well, he weighed like 311. He weighed like 311 at the combine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Which is great. I disagree with the notion, though, that he ends up being a 1st rounder because he didn't have the milestones that we typically look for in risers throughout the process. He was hurt. He didn't get to do the Senior Bowl, which he could have shined at. He didn't get to do the NFL Combine, which he would have shined at. So because he doesn't have those typical rising milestones, those different achievement points where we will see scouts and team evaluators go, okay, all right, this caught our attention, that caught our attention. I think that the one guy that we've already mentioned before, Jalen Knoll, the Iowa State receiver, is a really good example. The other one that I would throw out there, which I don't know if it's totally 1st round, but could end up going really early on day 2. I still think that Darius Alexander's Senior Bowl performance, the Toledo defensive tackle, is worth considering in that conversation too.
Yep. I think Darius Alexander's a good one out of Toledo. He was probably more of like a 3rd to 4th rounder going into Senior Bowl week. He's probably very early. He could be a top 50 pick when all is said and done. Jalen Knoll is the one I was going to say, the wide receiver out of Iowa State. We talked about this week. He has stacked good performance after good performance in the draft process. And ultimately, this is a resume builder, right? Like that's what this process is. He had a really good last year film. He had a dominant Senior Bowl week. He tested out of the gym. He doesn't have off the field concerns. Like that's a guy that will continue to rise up boards. And I would not be shocked at all if Jalen Knoll is a late 1st round pick or at least a very early 2nd round selection when this whole process is done. I'm trying to think of like a couple others, Joe. I don't know. I mean, like not 1st rounds, but like if we're just talking about guys that are general risers in the class, I do think like a Zav Frazier out of UTSA, the long corner that ran just a batty number at the combine. That's a kid that could rise a little bit kind of throughout the next few weeks, just based on the height, weight, speed. You saw a guy yesterday I think could continue to move up a little bit, and that's Chase Luntz, the offensive tackle from UConn, because like there's not enough blindside protectors in this class, which is kind of funny because he played right tackle at UConn, but like that profile screams blindside protector, and I would not be shocked if he ended up playing left tackle in the NFL level. So I think you may have saw one yesterday, Joe. Chase Lunt could be a guy that I wouldn't be shocked is a top 50 selection in this class.
the group of people I was standing with at the UConn Pro Day, watching him do the on the field work, and this is no negative to the other UConn guys. Chase Lunt was the star of the show. There were really no other prospects that were there that were actually like in consideration to get drafted earlier than the 6th round, maybe. Lunt, watching him compared to everybody else, was so shocking because not only, I sent you a picture of him, not only is he built like a heavier tight end, like this is a crazy build for a tackle. He is jacked beyond jacked, but he was so fluid and easy moving. I was stunned, and I was disappointed that we didn't get athletic testing. I just realized UConn's media department didn't send me numbers from the pro day. They were a mess yesterday. I'm not going to get into that.
You had a great experience up in UConn.
Well, I had to walk. I walked over. I was told I was designated to like a very tight, far away area of the pro day, which is so stupid. And so I walked over the rope.
Is what you're saying. You got great video. It was
awesome. Well, I didn't get any. I didn't record any video. Actually, I got some video of my guy Donato Cressanti, the Rhode Island long snapper, who's a riser in this class.
Never heard of him. Never heard of him.
He's gonna get a lot of good opportunities though. But I ended up having to walk over a rope and exit or go through an area I was not given access to, but nobody stopped me, so we ended up being okay. But my point is though is that Lunt looked phenomenal during the field drills. And I really think that if there also is like a really, really unexpected early 2nd round pick, it's going to be Chase Lunt.
We are over 900 people now in this chat, folks. Make sure, if you are not following us on YouTube, A to Z Sports Film Room, go over there because if you want to continue to put some great questions into the chat as we keep rolling through these, a lot easier to field those questions on YouTube. So A to Z Sports Film Room, I've also tweeted out the link earlier. Make sure, over 900 people in this chat want to continue to have a great conversation, and thank you guys for the support.
Next question we have from Justin from the YouTube chat. As we said, we are prioritizing the YouTube questions. He asks, why is nobody talking about Curtis Rourke? I feel like he could be the next Brock Purdy. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I've been impressed with Curtis Rourke. I was impressed with him this year. He doesn't have the requisite big arm that you look for in a starting quarterback. And I know Brock Purdy didn't have a massive arm. Yeah, I think it's fine. I also don't know if he's got like that really tactile decision-making that Brock Purdy had that made him so good and perform as well as he did. Rourke's a good day 3 pick. I think that he should get some recognition as a day 3 guy who could be a backup.
He's got a great frame, really great frame. I think his arm is solid for NFL standards. I think he's actually an okay athlete. Like, he was dealing with the injury, obviously, this year, which affected his ability to be a little bit of a navigator. But if you watch him at Ohio, he ran the ball, and they would even do, like, some design run stuff for him. I really like him outside the numbers. I think he's a good touch thrower outside the numbers. I think he throws a good back shoulder ball, like all those types of things. I think he really struggles with accuracy to the middle of the field. I think that is one thing that is kind of his hindrance, in my opinion. The other thing, Joe, we've talked about this with a couple guys this year. Tyler Shuck is another comparison here. Curtis Rourke had some durability concerns during his time in Ohio, and he was banged up. And then even though he played the majority of this year for Indiana, he was also banged up throughout the entire season. So I think that durability is a little bit of a concern. I think the accuracy in the middle of the field is a little bit of concern. So I think he ends up probably getting drafted, but he's like a borderline kid to me just because good player. I don't know if he's a guy that projects to a high level in the NFL, but if he ends up being a backup for a decent amount of time, I wouldn't be overly shocked. He's a good player, and I was obviously a great college football player when healthy.
All right, here's a great question that we have from last one from Tom Kelly. If you combine 2024 and 2025 first rounds into one single round, so basically if you combine the first round prospects from last year to the projected first rounders this year, how many picks would come from the weaker 2025 class? I would go as far as this. Yeah, this is a great question because I think that it's framing things very effectively for this conversation. I don't want to go like crazy with like trying to sit here and evaluate this thing because like we could like do is this guy better than that guy? Was this guy better than that guy?
Can I do it an easier way then? Can we do this an easier way?
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting conversation. Let's just go quickly one by one not one by one. We'll just talk through it positionally. Okay. Cam Ward, comparative to last year's class of Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix. Where would he slot for you as far as in the quarterback pecking order?
He would have been, I would have put him right in front of Michael Penix. I probably would have put him at 5 or 4, and I still would have I said this last year, I would have taken him in the first round.
Okay.
I still would have taken him in the first round. So I put him at 5 or 4. So he would have still been a first rounder, despite some people trying to make it seem like he's not. He definitely would have been.
Yeah. Oh, I think he would have been a first rounder last year. Obviously, he wouldn't have been the first overall pick. It's interesting. I need to look back at my Drake May grade, Joe, because I had Caleb and I had Jaden, and then I had Drake in last year's class, right? As far as like my hierarchy. The first two are definitely above Cam Ward, no doubt. It's interesting like where he would slot versus Drake May. I need to go back and look at my grade. Running back wise, the first running back taken last year was who? It was last year was running back Bruce Stunk, right? So Ashton Jeanty would be in the first round last year. He would be in the first
I couldn't even
round
tell
in
you
this
who the first running back was.
Well, oh, it was the kid from Texas that got drafted by the Panthers.
Oh, it was
like
Jonathan. Yeah, it was Jonathan Brooks. He
Jonathan
went picked 46, which was way too early for a guy who didn't even play. Genty and I mean, you could go.
Hampton,
I would
maybe?
I would have taken Omarion Hampton, Trevion Henderson, and DJ Giddens all over all of those guys.
Agree with that one. Wide receiver, working through that one real quick. So wide receiver 1, Luther Burden for me. Do you have Luther Burden as your top guy? Who's your top guy?
No, Matthew Golden's my top guy. So wait, let me frame receiver this way. These were the receivers because I don't think we're gonna have any debate on Adunze and Malik Neighbors and all those guys. The receivers that snuck in after Brian Thomas. I still don't think any of these receivers would have gone over Brian Thomas, but we had 3 guys sneaking into the end of the first round. Xavier Worthy, Ricky Pearsall, Xavier Legette. I think that Pearsall and Legette, Tedero McMillan, Luther Burden, and Matthew Golden, and Emeka Buka would all be better than those guys.
Agreed. So they would have had a chance to go over top of those guys. I agree there. So maybe the second wave of wide receivers would have been nice for 2025. Obviously, nobody would have went over Brock Bowers at tight end, but Tyler Warren would have still been a first round pick. I think he still would have been a first.
And Colston Loveland would have been first round picks.
Yeah, they would have been close. Offensive tackle, I mean, so the offensive tackles last year, offensive line last year, you had Joe Alt, you had J.C. Latham that went off the board, you had Olu Fashanu, you had Talisi Fuwanga. I mean, Amarius Mims, like offensive line. I think the first one might have been like late first if you combine both those two classes. Like I don't know, man. I'm not sure. Josh Simmons.
I think that this class we would have seen Josh Simmons, Will Campbell, Tyler Booker go over the likes of Jordan Morgan, Graham Barton, and Tyler Guyton. I think all of those guys. Because after Mims, I think is that cutoff point where all of those other players like Will Campbell and them would have fit into the mix.
I mean, they definitely should have gone over Jordan Morgan, for instance, right? But like, I don't know. That's offensive line's interesting. Defensive line wise, I liked I mean, we had a little bit of a run there, obviously. Like Dallas Turner was drafted top 17, but like Jared Verse was my top overall edge last year. He went 19. I really like Jared Verse a lot. Abdul Carter's better, right? So like he obviously would have been a first round pick without question next if you combine both classes. Who else from this edge group would have been a first round pick between the two, do you think?
Compared to all of those guys, I think Shamar Stewart,
probably
James Pierce Jr., Michael Williams, Mike Green, we've talked about for varying reasons that he who knows what ends up actually happening with him. I think definitely Shamar Stewart would have been in the mix.
Yes.
I think all of those guys could have likely gone earlier than those prospects that we just mentioned there, Jared Verse and Dallas Turner. Maybe not Jared Verse. I think just Dallas Turner went a lot earlier than most people would have taken him.
Byron Murphy was the 16th overall pick, the defensive lineman. I did not like him coming out of Texas, and lo and behold, Joe, he wasn't very productive as a rookie. Who would have thought that one was going to happen? Mason Graham obviously is better than him. Yes. Kenneth Grant's comparatively
better than
to
him.
Yeah. Trying to think.
No other defensive tackles though.
Derek Harmon?
Maybe Derek Harmon. Yeah.
Derek Harmon. Maybe. I don't know.
Linebacker. We didn't have
Campbell
any first round
probably
linebackers.
Would still be a first round pick, most likely.
Yes.
Campbell, most likely.
cornerback, the first corner that was taken last year was Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah, it's still
I
like the
think
20s, dude. That I think
yeah.
I think we overthought that corner class last year. By the way, like Quinyon's good, dude. Really
Well,
good
there was a
player.
lot of really good corner talent in the class, and I think that
Yeah.
caused an unexpected slide, which is why a lot of times when I get questions asked about these like really deep position groups of like how early is the second running back going to go, all those things.
Right.
I think they're going to go a lot later than everybody believes because a lot of teams are going to go,
Hmm.
oh, we'll just get that guy we'll get a guy like that in the third round. That's kind of what happened
Right.
with the corners
Who
last
was
year.
the first safety taken last year? Who was the first safety? Was,
Man, we did not
honestly,
have a good safety class. Tyler Nubin.
was Tyler Nubin the first one? Oh my
Yeah, Tyler
gosh,
Nubin
that's
was the first
really
safety
bad.
last year. Yeah, we didn't have a good safety class, so that one's not going to compare because we could have
Yeah.
two safeties drafted in the first round this year.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, number 47 overall was where the Giants drafted Nubin last year as the first safety off the board. We would have had top two, at least two safeties drafted before Tyler Nubin, so they would have been potentially borderline first rounders.
Right. Right. Okay. Wait, that's all of them, right? That's all the position groups.
I think. Yep. Yep. Safety. We talked
Okay.
linebacker. We talked edge, corner, defensive tackle. Yep. Yep. And we just talked about offensive line as a full group, right? Like we didn't break it up into interior versus tackles. So.
Let's get two more questions in before we close out today. The next question that we had from PI Staker. Have you heard any whispers of certain players and who they are, if you can say, being completely removed from team boards, whether it's medical or character issues? So the answer to that is yes.
We've talked about it a
We
lot,
have.
and I think we may have talked about it last week on this live show, but we've definitely talked about it on our show just in general. I can say for a fact, PI Staker, excuse me, that there are some boards that have Mike Green off of it from Marshall based upon just all the past stuff, but more importantly, how he answered some questions about the past stuff, right? Like that was kind of the big part of like the combine. Walter Nolan, I can tell you for a fact that a couple teams have him off their board at this point. I haven't really talked to anybody about James Pierce if he's off boards, Joe, but like based upon all the chatter, I think that that's kind of assumed at this point, right? Like I don't know. Like there's just a lot of conversation points there, but I don't want to say James Pierce with certainty because like I personally haven't talked to
Yeah.
anybody with a team that's like, yeah, he's completely off our board. So those are a couple of the guys that I know for a fact that are off at least a couple teams' boards. Medical stuff's going to continue to come out more and more. Like, luckily for Benjamin Morrison, and we talked about him earlier, I haven't heard any negative feedback on his injuries. So I would like to believe at least that like maybe it's not as bad as potentially we thought, but I haven't heard any other like serious medical red flags to like give me like overly concerned for some guys.
Right, right. No, I think that for the most part checks everybody that we've brought up at a certain point. We
Yeah.
had, and we love the great interaction that we get on some of the comments. We had one comment yesterday, and I responded to it. Somebody was like, oh, how can you just say all this about James Pierce Jr.? Like, how can you say that he's got character issues without like citing where you're getting it from? Basically implying that we made it up. And I
Every
was like, you understand
everybody's
that the
talking
NFL.
about it. What do you
Well,
mean?
one, everybody's talking about it. Two, uh, no NFL scout is going to say, put me on the record, put my name down, go
Right.
ahead. You're more than welcome to use my name. It's going to cost him his job. This is all the
Yeah.
give and take of the process of giving information out on both sides. It's how you establish relationships with agents and with scouts
Yes.
is that an agent or a scout will give you a piece of information. You might, in some other way, pass on information on to them. In the future, you might pass along a name of a prospect to pay attention to, whatever it might be.
Right.
It's a part of the process. You don't ask Adam Schefter for him to give out a source. Just because our name
Right.
isn't Adam Schefter does not mean that we're not talking to people that have reliable information. You know what the guy's counter, but this is one guy in particular, not reflective of everybody else that has been awesome in commenting and everything. But his response was, I haven't heard anything from my boys at go to Tennessee, like guys that are students. Like, okay, all right. That was basically his logic. So we're not just saying shit to say shit. I'm saying that. I'm trying to make this point that like we have information. We've actually talked to people that have given us the information. We're not just making shit up. They're like, oh yeah, I kind of don't like James Pierce. I think he's a piece of crap. So we're gonna make things up.
The source game is always so tricky because there are definitely people out there that do fake sources. Like that is 100% a thing that happens without question. But it's so tough though, Joe, because you can't verify that because like it's irresponsible to put a source out there. You know how to lose a source very
Yes.
quickly to put their name out there. You know what I mean? And like that damages relationships and that makes things very bad. So, yeah, sourcing is a very interesting conversation. That's why, like in an article, I've done this, but like also mainstream people have done this, or more mainstream people, I should say. Would you consider me a mainstream analyst at this point? By the way, like if I cross that
You're a
threshold yet?
hack.
Okay. I was just generally asking. I don't know if I should include myself in that conversation or not. I was actually asking the question. But there are like someone will say from an unnamed scout or from a scout on an NFC North team or whatever it is. The reason they do that is because they need confidentiality or else they lose sources, right? Like sources are so important in this industry and I mean, it's important in the NFL side of things too because like they need to be able to trust people because Joe, if a NFL scout if they're an area scout and they're going to these schools, right, and they're talking to coaches about players and stuff, what is a coach going to say about a player, Joe? Oh, he's great, man. Oh, great, love him, right? That's why they ask a bunch of different people opinions, right? Like when I know scouts when they go to some schools, they're not asking just the coaches their opinion. They're asking the counselors. They're asking the lunch people. They're asking everybody. Tell me everything you know about James Pierce Jr. I want to know everything about him. And eventually you tend to get to some truth ultimately, right? Like that's why sourcing is important. That's also why most people who are at least good in the industry don't just source one thing and then run with it as truth. Most people are talking to multiple people about the same conversation in order to get good sourced information because if you've heard it now from 4 to 5 to 6+ people, there's probably some truth to it, right? If I hear from one person, that
Right.
doesn't mean that it's necessarily true.
Right. Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to single anybody out, but like that's the context. If we're putting out information on any of these reports, it's not unsubstantiated. We're doing the work to verify and make sure this stuff is correct. Let's get to our last question that we have here from Fake Gardner 37. Are there any teams you think will trade up, and which players do you feel are worth trading up for? So we talked about the Giants earlier. I think their trade up possibility is kind of squashed at this point. We did this in our last mock draft. I think that two teams, and one that we didn't do that we acknowledged later on. There's two teams that I think sneakily, this is not sourcing, but just if we're talking about philosophy, what they need to address, possibly missing out on addressing key needs, and what they did in free agency. The Atlanta Falcons, if they feel panicked at the possibility of missing out on an edge rusher, or if Abdul Carter slid, I would think that they would be aggressive in trading up. And then the Texans, if there starts to become
Yes.
a run on tackles, I would think that there would be a trade up by them to go and get one of the top tackles if they had to move up to the teens. Those are the two teams, if I'm just going by logic and roster building, that make the most sense.
I think the Texans are the biggest one that I will validate that one as well. I think that they are a team that would be a serious trade up. Because Joe, you know what the worst case scenario is? Imagine if an offensive tackle or two, or just offensive lineman in general, let's say 1 to 2 go in the top 10. Houston's in some trouble, man, because there's most likely going to be a run now because that's how runs get started when a couple guys go off earlier than maybe we initially anticipated. And if there's another offensive lineman or two that goes from 11 to 20, then sitting there at 25 gets a little hairy, man, because they don't just need one offensive lineman. They need multiple offensive linemen. Even if they would have kept Laramie Tunsil and even if they liked Kenyon Green, I mean, Kenyon Green was bad last year. So and he's been mostly bad during his Texans career. So let's not even include him in this conversation. But even if you had Laramie Tunsil still, you still needed 2 offensive linemen potentially in this room to be able to hopefully take it to the next step. Now that you don't have a left tackle, I know you Sam, who they signed, Cam Robinson, right? And it's just like, guys, Cam Robinson at 14 mil a year is not going to stop you from drafting an offensive tackle. Like, it's just not going to stop you from doing that.
I'm blown away by the Texans fans' perspective on this whole thing because actually you tune in all the time. Me, and my co-host Sean Anderson, we do all levels of football talk from like a broader view. And we talked about the teams that we thought had really bad free agencies. And we broke down like, hey, getting rid of Laramie Tunsil, if he doesn't fit in the locker room or not, it's not good roster building. You got rid of the guy who was the most talented offensive lineman that you had. Even if you're trying to rework the character of the room, which was what was talked about, it still doesn't make any sense. I am blown away by the amount of comments that I've gotten on this video that are like pissed off at us saying that was a bad move. I really, really think, and I'm emphasizing this, that the outsider's perspective, looking at not having any affiliation with Houston or anything, if I'm just looking at the team and knowing how that team performed this year, knowing that they had the third most amount of pressures to a quarterback who is one of the brightest and most talented young quarterbacks in the NFL, that is disturbing. And moving on from the one guy who's had some, even if it was a consistent reliability, some reliability is stupid. So yeah, if they don't leave the first round with an offensive tackle, Ryan, I think that this offseason is a complete and utter joke of a failure. It is a complete failure by the Texans, and Texans fans should be pissed off, and they will be pissed off every single week watching CJ Stroud get put on his back. God forbid he suffers some sort of a serious injury. Their tune will change completely.
Well, one, Laramie Tunsil's great, right? Like, he's a really good offensive lineman on the NFL level. He's made 5 of the last 6 Pro Bowls, right? Like, he's a really good offensive lineman. Joe, unfortunately, though, the Texans have been in this position before, because I'm literally looking at it right now, in the 2019 NFL draft, they needed offensive line help desperately. They needed it in the first round. They got jumped by the Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles actually traded up to 22. They drafted Andre Dillard, and Andre Dillard didn't end up being anything in the NFL. Right. But that was the guy that the Houston Texans wanted, and the Houston Texans had to sit there in 23, Joe. And you know what they did? They
took Titus Howard, right?
They took Titus Howard, who was viewed as like a second to third round developmental guy, and they took him at 23. You know why? Because they were desperate. They still needed an offensive lineman, and they literally got jumped. So in that draft class I was looking at, you had offensive linemen that went off the board. It wasn't a great offensive line class just in general in that spot, I don't believe. Let me look. So you had Garrett Bradbury, who was drafted before him as a center. You had Jonah Williams drafted. You had Chris Lindstrom, who obviously Chris Lindstrom.
It was a comically bad offensive line class. It was probably one of the worst that we've had in the last 10 years.
Caleb McGarry was a first-round pick, too, out of Atlanta. He's been like a very below-average offensive tackle. Then in the front end of the second round, Jawan Taylor went to Jacksonville. Greg Little went to Carolina at number 37. And then Cody Ford went to Buffalo at 38. Oh, my God. That was a really
but it's funny. It's funny to consider, not to cut you off, that the Texans have historically been really bad at drafting offensive linemen. Nick Caserio's been there for some time, and he's hit some home runs at receiver. They hit a home run, obviously, with CJ Stroud. They hit a home run with looking through all the nonsense with the projection on Will Anderson. They just said, this guy's productive in college as a sophomore. We're going to take the damn kid. They've gotten value out of unexpected linebackers. They've got some good value out of their defensive backs. Kalen Bullock has played really well, despite there being a lot of, and Kamari Lassiter had a really nice first season. Like, both those guys was like, oh, can they pan out? Can they work? But they played to their strengths, and they did play well alongside one another. But offensive line, they have been awful. They've been horrible at finding offensive linemen. So again, I strongly reiterate, if they don't get somebody early, a guard or a tackle, it is an utter miss and a failure by this Texans team.
And it's a weird parallel, because this offensive line class is also not a great offensive line class either. So you've put yourself in desperation mode on the offensive line in a spot that is not typical for grading great offensive linemen at pick number 25. Like, usually good offensive linemen go a little bit earlier. It feels like this franchise is kind of repeating its failures in this offensive line class, and this could mirror 2019 when all is said and done, but we shall see.
Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We had really great interaction on Twitter and also on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And also, as we're closing out, hit the like button, rewatch from the beginning to catch all the great conversations. We're going to be live every single Wednesday at noon, every single Wednesday up until the draft. We'll probably even go after the draft. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you guys later. Enjoy the rest of your week.